Woman, an in-depth exploration of the world of women today with Sandra Elkin.
Good evening and welcome to Woman. My guest tonight is Margaret Sloan. In recent years, Margaret has devoted herself to the women's liberation movement. She teamed with Gloria Steinem and lectured on all aspects of sexism and racism. Her articles on black feminism have appeared in the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, and Ms. Magazine, where she was one of the editorial staff and now a contributing writer. Most recently, she was one of the founders and first chairwomen of the NBFO, the National Black Feminist Organization. Margaret is currently writing a book on black feminism. Margaret, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here.
I guess I can't be in your book, huh?
Yes, that would be a chapter in my book dealing with white feminists and our relationships to their relationships to black women, because the movement is for all women.
I was really only kidding, but I'm glad to hear that. When you were traveling with Gloria Steinem, you spoke on sexism and racism. What are some of the messages that you tried to get across to the women that you talked to?
I think one of the things that it was important to get across is that you couldn't talk about sexism unless you talked about racism, and vice versa, and that emphasizing that as women have begun to do research and examine the whole female culture, we understand very clearly that sexism is the underlying isms, which all of the isms flow: racism, capitalism, imperialism. And so it was very important to get the message across to women that this was the kind of movement that we were talking about was something that was important to all women, that there were certain oppressions that transcended class and race. For example, all women are potential rape victims. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, what you wear. And there were the abortion issue. I mean, there were clear issues, the marriage and divorce laws, the whole reproductive freedom areas, the Equal Rights Amendment. These were things that really affected women. And women, together were more than half the world in terms of our numbers. And we were really trying to let women understand that it was very important to come together, at least politically, on issues that affected our lives, because a coalition that powerful really could and can make some waves in this country that will lead to some kind of radical change.
Did you get the same kind of response from women across the country, or did they ask different questions in different parts of the country?
I don't know. I think that one interesting thing that would come from women who weren't in New York and Los Angeles, they would always assume that that somehow New York and California in general had everything together, and yet we would be in their towns and we'd see these women's centers that had HEW funding, and we'd see these really radical projects and very imaginative kinds of things that were going on. And because they unfortunately had read the media, they believed that everything else was important outside of their own area. And we were very impressed by a lot of the activity that was going on in the Midwest and the South, the Northwest. It was really very mind-blowing for us, because you get into sometimes East Coast chauvinism.
Yes, you do.
Which is very dangerous.
Right. How did you come to the feminist movement?
Well, by being black and by being female. I mean, I know that sounds too easy, but
which do you think of first? Do you think of yourself as black or female first?
I don't think of myself as black or female. I mean, I don't look at life. I don't think the oppressor says, well, from Monday to Wednesday we're gonna, discriminate against her because she's female, and the rest of the week we're gonna discriminate against her because she's black. I am a black and female person who lives in a country that is sexist and racist. And so for me, it would be very difficult and impossible to separate my oppressions out that way. I am perceived as a black woman, and so that's how I live my life, and those are the impressions I experience, and those are the things that I fight.
You came to the feminist movement in a way through the civil rights movement, right?
Many of us did. We ran screaming and kicking to the feminist movement. Yes, I came out of the civil rights movement, and after, being a very active part in the civil rights movement and later the black liberation struggle, realizing the very devastating but very real thing is that the civil rights organizations, black liberation organizations, were born out of a patriarchal society. And so the male leadership games, the whole liberation struggles somehow unfortunately suffered a great deal from being very patriarchal in structure, very oppressive carrying on the same kinds of oppressions that we as black people, men and women, were fighting so desperately to be free of.
Did you have a kind of a click at one point and say, you know, I must join the feminist movement?
No, in fact, I think I reacted to the women's movement like many women did. I believe the distorted white male-dominated media image of what the movement was about, and so I read it and I said, what are these, you know, white women talking about? You know, again, I assumed that white women were the people that had the problem, you know, and I saw the media interpretation of it. You know, the pictures would be young white women under 21, you know, and so I said, oh, you know, this is crazy. What is this talk? But for some reason, I read and I kept my eyes opened, and I had the opportunity to meet Florence Kennedy, who was a black feminist and an attorney and just a dirty old lady, as she calls herself. And she turned me on and made things very clear in my head, made very good analysis about institutionalized oppression as it relates to black women, and really kind of opened my mind. And from there on, things just kind of followed. I began to see real parallels between the positions of minority men in this society and women, very clear parallels. And I became very impatient, like I wanted to, I wanted to really work on concerns that were important to me as a woman, because I couldn't see how working on things that would improve the lives of black women, which are over half of the black nation in society. I couldn't see how working on things that would make black women free couldn't help, you know, the entire black race.
Expand a little bit on some of the parallels that you saw between women and minority men.
Stereotypes, you know, whether they be cultural or, you know, myths that surround the race and sex myths, you know, blacks are lazy, don't want to work, can't keep a job. The same things they say about women, you know, lazy, can't hold a good job down, you know. All the kinds of, you know, ridiculous myths that unfortunately have followed us through history. And I must say that after the Black Liberation Movement at least made the front page of the New York Times, there is some kind of degree of seriousness, at least whether it be token or not, in how the movement, the Black Liberation Movement, is perceived, again, because it was black men who ran it. But I must say that I think it's going to take the feminist movement and women in general a long time to get that kind of respect that minority men have. And I'm not about to say that minority men are suddenly free. I'm saying that there's not the kind of racist jokes, there's not the kinds of put downs and ridicules. At least the Black liberation struggle is seen as a serious struggle in the society. Whether people agree with it or not, it's seen as a serious struggle. But many times as we went around the country, we would be on different television shows or interview, you know, these Neanderthals would interview you, and you'd be talking about great civil rights issues like you know, reproductive freedom, the control of our reproductive lives, and the fact that the rape rate is increasing. It's the most violent crime in America that's on the increase. We'd be talking about things like this, and some old backward man would talk about, well, you know, don't you want us to open the door for you anymore? You know, that was a mentality of what was out there carrying out our message. And so it was a real struggle to try to, you know, to get through those basic things. Obviously, those were consciousness-raising kinds of things that women were saying. You know, how could you go into grandiose displays of respect, opening doors, when you won't pay me what I'm worth? And so men would answer and say, well, if you don't let me open the door for you, I'll slam it on your hand. You know, so it would get to that level, and we'd never get to talk about the fact that we weren't talking about reform, we weren't talking about public relations, we're talking about revolution. We're talking about the fact that if in fact the Equal Rights Amendment is realized, that we'd have to have an economic revolution in this country, because this present system can't afford to pay women what we're worth. So when you start thinking in terms of the economics of feminism, people get very nasty and do really tricky things. At first, they liberally, the few states that did liberally pass the Equal Rights Amendment, they said, well, we'll just give those broads, you know, what they want. They start thinking about what was really going down with this, and suddenly you had the legislators, like in Oklahoma, reading from the Bible, quoting how if this legislation was passed, it would mean the end of apple pie and the flag, and so Oklahoma didn't pass the Equal Rights Amendment. And you have states now scrambling to try to rescind their vote, because people are really realizing on some level how serious we are in the politics and the economics of feminism. And they're very scared, and they should be.
Tell me about the NBFO, the National Black Feminist Organization, which you founded now. Why did you find it necessary to do that?
Well, let me preface it. I didn't find it by myself. I don't want to ever get in that dangerous position of assuming that I could, do that. Several black women in New York City got together after a meeting was called together by a black feminist, trying to get black women together and analyze our relationship with the black liberation movement, with the feminist movement in general. From that, ironically, I don't really think most of us thought of founding an organization. We just decided that we had such an experience spending the day talking with each other, we'd like to hold a conference to bring as many women from the East Coast as possible, black women, to talk about feminism. But that summer of last year, the media did another job on black women. There was a lot of articles depicting the relationship of black women to white women, none of which were written by black women, by the way. A famous news magazine had a terrible article misquoting black feminists. There was a black magazine that had an article saying women's lib has no soul. It was written by a white psychiatrist. And these kind of things really messed us up. And then there was a civil rights leader who was going around the country saying that the recent Supreme Court decision on abortion meant genocide for black women. So we were furious. Everybody was talking for black women but us. So we said, we're going to call a press conference. We're going to tell them we have this organization. It's a national organization. And I love the arrogance of black women because we just, kind of did it. And everybody came. All the press came because they were hungry like piranhas. They just knew we were going to cut up everybody and trash white women, trash black men, trash everybody. So everybody came, the German press. I mean, the room was more press there than we were. It was only 15 of us. So, they said to us, well, they said, Ms. Sloan, how many women do you have as members? And we said, potentially millions. Next question, we went on. And the interesting thing about that is that we never expected to get the response that we did. We knew there were black feminists out there, but we'd been so beaten down kind of by the media image of it that we believed, well, if there were black feminists out there, it was probably maybe one in every state at best. And the next day we received over 200 calls from black women around the country saying, where have you been? I feel so alone. There's no group I can identify with. Is there a chapter in my city? And the next day we got another 200 calls. Now we have about 3,000 women. We have chapters springing up in different cities. So NBFO really kind of grew faster than we were prepared for it. But it was really, we knew that there were black feminists out there, and for whatever valid or not valid reasons, they weren't responding to the established feminist organizations. And it seemed like us emerging as a national organization, as a public, above ground, black feminist organization was like a flag to these women, and they responded to us, and they're still responding.
What are your goals?
Well, at the risk of, let me preface this by saying that we haven't really had a convention of our membership to define national goals. So we do have a statement of purpose, and we have a basic philosophy in that we want to fight to end the oppression of black and female people. That is our priority, because we as black women feel that we must work on ourselves. Nobody else can do it. Not white women, not black men, certainly not white men. So we have to do it, and we believe if there's any kind of important radical change that's going to come, it has to begin with yourself. It's very difficult, to work and do and fight other people's battles. And black women certainly have enough battles to fight that we can just start right there and go another couple hundred years and still have to work on it. So our goals are very similar to, we are part of the feminist movement. That's in our philosophy, and that's our statement of purpose. We always have been. It's just the media chose not to focus in on us, but we've always been there. So our goals are very simple, and very similar to the current feminist goals: reproductive freedom, into restrictive laws that would lock an individual out because of race or sex. And from there, we haven't really gotten into how we will choose to go about on a national basis fighting these battles. Local areas will work on priorities in their particular areas, but we will be doing that very soon.
Is one possibility a lobby?
We don't know about that. We have been doing
You don't know about that, or you don't want to talk about that?
Well, we've been doing some lobby work, but there are tax statuses and all those kinds of things, and we're still new at that point. We are really trying mainly to concretize and get ourselves together internally, and I think once that's settled, then we'll know about lobbying or whatever. But black women we participated here in New York State with the Women's Coalition to lobby. We were very active in the lobbying that went up in Albany this year. We were a visible presence, and it made a difference because, see, these white women who are very guilty can let these legislators dismiss them and say, well, you're just a bunch of white women. But see, they couldn't say that with us at all on any level. And we were there very strong, and we were very consistent, and we'll be back again as long as we can do it and feel we should do it.
How do you feel? I mean, not necessarily the NBFO, but what's your feeling about what sexism has done to black women? I mean,
Well, I think you have to look at it in the large context. I mean, what sexism has done to all women is painful, is damaging. You know, it has not certainly been healthy for the growth of a human race. And then you look at the entire black nation that's within, you know, that's within that whole world of sexism. And unfortunately, you know, black men and minority men have embraced all the concepts and all the vestiges of Europeanism. So obviously, that's sexism, you know, and the oppressors the oppressed people are very good at imitating the oppressor. In fact, sometimes they can even do it better, you know, in order to just, I don't know, in order to just so-called feel good. And one of the things that we must do is emphasize to black women that those kinds of things can't be used on us. We can't seriously be talking about it freeing an entire people and yet asking over half of that people to take some kind of subservient position or subservient role. That's very dangerous when you're talking about liberating a whole people. Sexism has affected black women like it's affected white women, probably deeper because of the racism that's there. So while all women in general have a poor self-image, black women have virtually no positive self-images to relate to. Most of our images have come from the boxes of pancakes or some kind of stereotypical negress image that's been concocted by white people or in more recent times, black men. That's very damaging because, of course, you can't talk about, you know, working on child care centers or organizing demonstrations if you believe your lips are too big or your hair is bad or you're ugly. So inherent in our structure is consciousness raising. We believe it's very important for black women to get into their heads and start believing that they are somebody. Because if you believe nobody, all you're going to do is lead people to the rear, and then you'll have a backwards movement. So we're very conscious of how sexism has affected black women. For example, all women, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, all women make less than all men in terms of annual incomes that are estimated by, you know, for workers in this country. But black women make less than white women. So it's, again, we're always behind. I mean, you know, all women are oppressed, but black women are more oppressed. It affects us in all kinds of things. You know, we have more white women on welfare because there are more white women, but a disproportionate number of those people are black women and children. You know, and then it's an overall, you know, statistic that, you know, it's no accident that mostly women and children are on welfare, because that's a direct relationship to most women don't earn no money. So.
How do black men react to black feminism?
Well, I haven't talked to black men, you know, all black men about black feminism. I think there are a lot of myths, though, about the reaction of black men to feminism.
That's really what I wanted you to talk about.
Yeah. There's a lot of myths because people will always say to us, you know, on campuses, usually it's some white man, he will say to us, but how do black men feel about this? You know, and it's been my experience since I've been, you know, publicly out talking about feminism, that the most resistance does not come from the guy on the corner or the guy shooting pool or even the black guy, you know, in the civil rights organization. The person that seems most threatened by the feminist movement is your socially upward mobile, college-educated white man who has so much to lose by everybody getting together. The two semi-physical attacks that Gloria and I almost encountered came from white men. The kind of hooting and ostracism and, you know, kind of trying to tear you down stuff came from white men. We've had a lot of support from black and third world organizations, and since NBFO is formed, we haven't received any negative letters or response from black men. We did get one letter at the beginning from a black male pimp out in California asking if we agreed on now's position of prostitution, legalized prostitution, because it would be bad for black women because he employed so many and they wouldn't have jobs or something. I mean, it was some strange rationale, but we haven't heard from any black men. We've had support, you know. Which is not to say that black men aren't sexist. I don't want to give that impression at all, but I think that there is a clear myth. There's a push by the white men who run the media that black men are more sexist, so let's deal with them, so it keeps the burden off them. And I don't like to get into degrees of who's more sexist. See, I think that's a very dangerous myth. When the threat is hardest, that's who's more sexist. You know, it could be in your bedroom, it could be in the corner, it could be, you know, Mr. Jones who runs your factory or your office. It depends on who's feeling most threatened at that particular time. So I don't like to get into, you know, who reacts the worst. You know, I guess it boils down to power. You know, and it seems like white men who have most power would be more threatened by all women, the kind of coalition we're talking about, all women and then minority men getting together. I mean, women make up 53% of the country, and then you have minority men making up 17%, so the white men are just kind of tiny, and they get very nervous. They get very nervous.
Margaret, you're very often critical of the media's treatment of the black women, and
Yes.
you're very upset about the image that black women have.
Well, I'm upset about, up until very recently, the lack of the image we had. We weren't in there. We weren't very visible. But recently we've been very visible, but of course it's been not the healthiest kind of visibility. The media is very powerful. Just one Jane Pittman on, nationwide TV can let everybody in America know of the talent of Cicely Tyson, and yet she's been out there for a long time. The media is very powerful, and in fact, in NBFO we have a media task force because we're so concerned about how black women are portrayed, not just in TV, but in film, in books, in commercials, whatever. And we find while white women have had the, and I don't want to say chance because I don't think opportunities to be exploited are chances, but while white women have had the access to be visible in the media, and I don't think that their image has been terrific, black women haven't even had that access. And so it seems to me that the battles around the media, challenging not just the people that stand behind the camera, but people who write, direct, whatever it is, there needs to be a real serious examining, a coalition of what is going down. There's new so-called black female-headed families, or black females on these series and stuff. And there's a lot of danger in that. There's a lot of danger in laughing at the black female, or the black experience, but laughing, and using humor as a way to kind of ease the guilt of America as to what it's done to, oppressed groups. And the films that are coming out, we don't have any black female writers that have been allowed to be exposed in that way to our actresses, just the whole concept of what was beautiful up until recently was so limiting that very few white women could fit into it. And so that's one of the things that we really are going to work very hard on.
What exactly do you think you can do? I mean, what will be some positive things?
Well, one of the things we can do is, Flo Kennedy talks about is boycott. See, women, or she calls them apricot, women don't realize how powerful we are in terms of dollars. We don't control, it's a myth that we own all this money, but we don't control, whether we're going to make a particular product, but we can control the choices between does and Tide, and that's important. We can control, at the point of purchase. And women have to realize that. And so we have to start saying things to, I won't call products out, I'm not supposed to do that. But we have to start saying to these hair rinse companies, for example, that have dyed the heads of women for years and make billions of dollars off of it, we have to say, listen, we don't like the way you handle your commercials. We don't like your images, and if you don't, check yourself. We're going to just boycott nationally. And we can do that. See, we have that power. But oppressed people never believe the power that they have in the first place. But in just local areas, when in civil rights organizations, we would boycott particular stores and national chains, we had tremendous effect. And I think women just don't have enough guts to believe that we can do that. I mean, there are other actions that we could do that I'm not prepared to suggest on TV. But I think that the imagination has to be there. There's a lot of companies, corporate structures that are riding on the backs of cheap female labor, and yet they, it's just very exploitative. I'm just not talking about the media. I think that there has to, Flo Kennedy says maybe the most that oppressed people can do is withdraw from the consent to oppression. And I think that that's a real important start. And women have got to realize that we're powerful. Our numbers are powerful. We see a lot of things, and we have to turn that power around and just kind of shove it down the oppressor's throat.
Okay, you've been doing a lot of work in rape, rehabilitation, and all kinds of things. What exactly are you doing?
Well, I'm not. I mean, we have a new committee on rape and sexual abuse.
I heard your voice on a sound truck.
Well, I'm when you say you, it sounds like me, and there's many other women that are doing it. My voice is just probably louder. I've been in this movement for 7 years, so I have no problem with that. But one of the things that we black women in NBFO are concerned, as all women are concerned, about the increase in the incidence of rape and sexual abuse throughout this country. And you know, they say only 1 out of every 10 rapes even gets reported. Now in this country, in New York City, for example, 68% of the rapes that happen on black and Hispanic women. And the young black girl, 11 to 19, is the person most victimized by rape. So as black women, we see this as a clear issue that black women must address ourselves to. You know, we have to separate the idea of rape being a sexual act and register it as the violent crime that it is. It is very difficult to get women, any women, to report rape. It's more difficult to get black women because of the mistrust of the police that she would have to go to in order to report the crime. We're just trying to start a massive campaign, particularly in New York State, just educating and speaking out about rape. And we're part of the Rape Coalition in New York City. We're going to be going out to areas where black women are and speaking and educating and showing self-defense methods and just what to do in case you've been raped. I mean, it's so much ignorance there just because black women have stayed away from the police for very real reasons. And so many times we find rapes just go rampantly, just rampant numbers of rape going reported. And we hope that this is something that our sisters in other parts of the country pick up. Our Atlanta chapter is working on rape. And the Detroit chapter wants to work on that also. It's really a very national concern. We see rape as being the female lynching. You know, it's just that serious.
Do you think self-defense is a good prevention?
I don't think there's any one answer. I have my own feelings about self-prevention. About deterring rape. I really believe that. I believe in very stiff penalties for rapists, and I'm a person that's not into capital punishment or not into prison. I'm against the prison system, but I feel so strong about the whole idea of rape and sexual abuse and how it's just right. It seems like as women get stronger and become more aggressive and make some public stands, I think it's no accident the reported number of rapes are on increase. You know, I just think that there's some kind of direct correlation with that, and
Margaret,
yeah.
We're out of time.
Okay.
I'm very sorry. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for watching. See you next week.
Production funding provided by public television stations, the Ford Foundation, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.